Ukraine's declaration that it has breached the first of Russia's defensive lines, towards the village of Verbove, has caused everyone to rush to the assumption that the counteroffensive will suddenly speed up. Now obviously that would be good. The world, and I mean even the beggar on the streets of Sudan, wants this war to end. It has affected everyone, not nearly as badly as the Ukrainian people, but the effects are felt worldwide. But realistically, will we really see a sudden burst of speed, that much anticipated breakthrough, like the cavalry of yesteryear riding unencumbered through the enemy ranks? Despite these hopes, it would be unwise to expect too much. Just getting through the minefields has been an amazing achievement, no cope intended, I assure you. The Russians have apparently laid up to 5 mines every square meter in some areas. What's more, it's always a mixture of anti-tank and anti-personnel mines, sometimes stacking anti-tank mines on top of each other to ensure the destruction of any mine-sweeping equipment brought forward. That has been horrible, grinding stuff. Men have been lost, hundreds maimed and disfigured, all to this hidden monster at their feet. I don't blame them for taking it slow, on the contrary, I hope they would. At the end of the day, the UA has been making approximately 700 to 1,200 meters of progress every 5 days, with a clear focus on sparing lives and their ultra-limited Western equipment. Despite the progress, there are still second and third Russian lines, defensive positions estimated at 20 miles deep. The Russians also haven't stopped and are laying further mines, sometimes with the help of drones. Mine clearing is dangerous, and now imagine doing it at night, under fire, or being buzzed by Russian drones. The terrain is open, with flat fields marked by tree lines and punctuated by occasional villages. Although Ukraine wants more specialist mine clearing equipment from the West, who knows how effective it will be. We have seen how the density of the Russian minefields can reduce the effectiveness of the mine plows and rollers supplied by the West. Nor does a breach in the line amount to a breakthrough. The gap needs to be wide enough to allow artillery to exploit things further forward, and for that to happen, its need to be as safe as possible. Despite Tokmak being a key goal, artillery still isn't in effective range yet. The distances covered illustrate the difficulty faced by Ukraine so far. Since June 5, when the counteroffensive began, at the 2 key points on the southern Zaporizhia front, Kiev's forces have gained about 5 miles south of Orikhiv and 7 miles south of Velika Novosilka. The problem is that Melitopol, the ultimate target south of Orikhiv, is still 55 miles from the tip of Ukraine's forces, and the port of Berdyansk is 70 miles from the Velika Novosilka advance. That's a long way. We need to be realistic. We are not going to get there this season, especially with the mud and cold coming. The biggest issue that the slow pace has resulted in is to give the detractors in the West an excuse to stifle their support and more ominously abandon it altogether. Also, if you consider the Kremlin's reduced objectives for this war, they are still able to claim a victory if Ukraine doesn't manage to change the front by much. I believe the only way for Russia to win militarily is to simply wait for the support in the West to come to an end whilst slowly grinding away at the population's resistance. Sensing this situation, Putin has not kept still. Using the old doctrine of offense as the best form of defense, he launched his own artillery-led counteroffensive in the Kupiansk to Lyman sector, as far away from the south as he could manage. Here, the Russians have been outshelling the Ukrainians by a ratio of 4-1. Before reinforcements rescued the situation, things were tight with an evacuation being called. Thankfully, this attack hasn't stopped Ukraine in the south, but the reinforcements could have been used to push the advantage where it was needed, instead of fighting a defensive action in the north. Whilst this is all happening, the US has been crying for Ukraine to focus on one point and to stop their pushes all along the line, especially around Bakhmut, which continues to absorb troops and therefore the weight that may be needed to speed up the offensive. But this would require a quantum shift in tactics from Ukraine that is largely reliant on a citizen army with limited manpower. Ukraine's patient tactics of advancing incrementally with small units plays to its strengths and helps to retain manpower which is not replaceable and will not be coming from Western supplies. I liken Ukraine's mindset to this offensive as death by 1,000 cuts, and it's obviously working, just not a pace the West is used to. Remember when the US Army cut through Saddam's Iraqi forces? Well, that set the tone for how America views a successful assault, but that was with all the arms of the US forces working in harmony. Ukraine simply doesn't have those luxuries. In conclusion, this offensive is not going to be speeding up anytime soon. We need to realistically understand that, and more importantly so do the Western backers. Sadly, we will be back doing this in 2024. What we need to do is to continue supporting Ukraine with what it needs most, artillery and missile ammunition, to reduce Russia's ability to strike on the battlefield and to enable Ukraine to keep pushing. This country is fighting for its life. It's need to be allowed to do that at its own pace.